The tragic murder of Chad Ensel. In 2016, 42-year-old Chad Ensel married Nikki Sue, who had 2 sons from a previous relationship, Marcus and Christopher. Chad had a variety of hobbies. He coached in the Little League, enjoyed amateur racing cars, often played golf and darts, and was a member of a bowling league. Nikki loved baking and ran a catering company. Their family rented a house near Bismarck, around Burley. On the early morning of Thursday, January 2, 2019, Nikki started receiving phone calls and messages from several of Chad's colleagues. That morning, he had not shown up for work, and no one could get in touch with him, too. Nikki was at work with client meetings scheduled. She didn't know Chad's whereabouts and was busy with her own affairs all day. Chad's colleagues contacted the police to conduct a welfare check at the house. Upon arrival, the officers found Chad's vehicle parked in the driveway, but no one answered the door. Peering through the front and side windows of the house, the police did not see anything suspicious. After Nikki finished work, she drove home. When she tried to enter, she was greeted by a column of smoke billowing from inside the house. Nikki called 911. Firefighters from Bismarck were the first to arrive at the scene. They entered the house and began extinguishing the flames inside. The fire had engulfed 2 rooms. The main source of combustion was in the master bedroom, where a mattress was smoldering and the paint and wallpaper on the walls and ceiling had melted. When the smoke in the bedroom cleared, the fire and rescue team found Chad Ensel. He was lying on the floor, naked and dead. Despite the damage caused by the fire, there were signs of what had happened to Chad. A shotgun lay on the bed. A heater had been knocked to the floor near the bed, the most likely source of the fire in the room. A second source of combustion was discovered in the basement. It was extinguished in less than 10 seconds. The lid from the stove had been removed, or was lying nearby, suggesting it had been removed before the fire started. Additionally, a torn pack of Marlboro cigarettes lay just a few feet from the stove. The fire department noted this pack as a potential source of ignition in the basement. They also contacted the ATF team to check the house for explosives, but none were found. As other agencies and emergency personnel arrived at the scene, the house was checked for other potential victims. Nikki's 2 sons were fortunately spending the holidays with their grandparents and were not inside the house when the fire started. Only Chad Ensel was found inside. There was 1 shell remaining in the shotgun. 2 empty liquor bottles were also found in the room. The heater could have accidentally tipped over onto the flammable mattress. At first glance, the evidence pointed to Chad committing suicide, but further investigation ruled out this version. Chad was found lying on the floor, with the shotgun on the bed several feet away from him. The autopsy revealed not 1, but 2 gunshot wounds, which would have been impossible if he had shot himself. This also meant that the shell remaining in the shotgun must have been loaded after Chad was shot. The only reason for this was the shooter's intention to make the investigation believe that the man had killed himself. The autopsy could not determine whether Chad had been drinking alcohol before his death, as indicated by the empty bottles left in the room. The autopsy found no signs that Chad was a regular alcohol user. Perhaps these bottles were part of the staging. The fire on the bed was described as spotty, indicating that alcohol had been used to accelerate the spread of the flames, and perhaps multiple attempts had been made to ignite it. The fact that there was a second fire in the basement, which started independently of the fire in the bedroom, was considered accidental. But this second fire confirmed the theory of a staged scene. The amount of smoke in the house indicated that the fire was caused by a lack of oxygen. The door to the room had been left slightly ajar, which could have extinguished the growing flames inside the room, despite the use of some combustible agent to ignite it. Testing was conducted to verify what caused the fire. At the same time, regular dogs indicated the use of a flammable liquid. Sheriff Officer Shire of Burleigh County sought assistance from the State Bureau of Criminal Investigation and also consulted with an Faber expert from the ATF. One of the first steps they took in the investigation was to review footage from surveillance cameras and cell phone records from the days leading up to the January 2nd fire. Chad's cell phone and iPad were seized from the house. From his correspondence, investigators learned that Chad had been home alone for several days prior to his death, while his wife, Nikki, was out of town. Text messages from Nikki to Chad, beginning the day after Christmas, December 26th, and continuing through the 30th, suggested that Nikki had been away for several days, taking training to improve her work skills. She always wanted to be successful in everything she did. Chad wrote her a message just a few days before his death. Investigators tracked Chad's last public appearance to December 30th. That evening, he went bowling and was captured on surveillance cameras around 6 p.m. Imitas. He exchanged a text message with his wife that evening, jokingly saying he had won $300 at bowling. He was also captured leaving the bowling alley around 10:24 WAP. This was the last time Chad was seen alive. The house they rented was equipped with a security system, including surveillance cameras and door sensors. A security log was also accessible, showing activity as well as a report of other recordings made by the camera. On December 30th, at 10:50 p.m., around the time the camera should have captured Chad returning home from bowling, it was damaged, and the video recording was unavailable for viewing. However, the sensors showed that the garage door was opened at that time, and the house was taken off security. Chad must have returned home. There were no signs of him leaving the house after his return. In the early hours of December 31st, the garage door sensor at the Ensel home again recorded it being opened. Whoever did this entered the house. At 2:56 a.m., the door was closed. Nothing else happened there. The next morning, Nikki called her husband's work. She said he was unwell and would not be able to come in. After her husband was found, Nikki became the main focus of attention and was called in for questioning. The home security system recorded numerous attempts under her account to access the cameras and put them into privacy mode. These changes were made several hours before the cameras captured Nikki near her home. Whatever changes she tried to make did not work. When she reached the house, she was not alone. With her was a familiar man she described to the police as a good friend named Earl Howard. One of the first questions Sheriff Shire's team asked Nikki was about her relationship with this person. Earl, a 40-year-old Canadian from Bellwood, Ontario, was just a friend. He was a company executive heading to Bismarck to evaluate potential job opportunities. Although Nikki insisted that her relationship with Earl was innocent, she also made it clear that her marriage was in a difficult situation. Nikki told Deputy Sheriff Shire of Burleigh County that her husband Chad had hurt her. She claimed her husband had alcohol problems and could fly into a rage. She had written him one last message on the day he was found dead. Occasionally sobbing, she spoke about her difficult marriage and the very recent arguments that had occurred over a broken furnace. Nikki explained that in the middle of winter, with no heating, she had no choice but to leave the house and stay in a hotel. Firefighters found a smoldering furnace that they claimed was not working. After calming Nikki down, Assistant Sheriff said he knew Chad was dead, but didn't know why. He believed Nikki was able to fill in the missing pieces. The topic of discussion then changed when Special Agent Joe Aarons entered the room. Up to this point, Nikki had spent hours answering questions, portraying herself as a confused woman subjected to harsh treatment and a distraught widow. Surveillance cameras at the Staybridge Bridge Hotel, where Nikki had checked in a few days before the incident, showed her with family friend Earl. What? They were staying in the same room, registered under his name. Woke. Cameras at the house had also captured Nikki and Earl together. Shortly before 7 in the evening, when Chad was bowling, Nikki and Earl had come to the house. In about an hour and a half, they carried out a laundry basket and many other items. Subsequent footage captured Earl making repeated trips in a white pickup truck to the hotel and back, transporting things. Investigators believed that Nikki and Earl were having an affair. But more importantly, they had removed all the belongings from the house, knowing that there would most likely be a fire there, probably because one or both of them were responsible for it. But the visit to the house that most interested investigators took place later that night, at 1 o'clock, when Chad should have already been home, and after which nothing was heard from him. Nikki told the assistant sheriff that she and Earl had gone out that night from the hotel, but only to look at Christmas lights. Eventually, she admitted to going to Chad's house. She said she needed to find some medication. However, just before leaving, Nikki remotely accessed the security system and put the cameras into privacy mode so they could not capture what was happening in the house. Why did Nikki and Earl return to the house at such a late hour? And what happened between them and Chad during that time? Nikki's medication, which she claimed to have unsuccessfully searched for at 1 in the morning and then returned for at 6:30 a.m., was found in plain sight on a kitchen shelf when emergency services entered the house to extinguish the fire. Strangely enough, almost 6 hours into the interrogation, Nikki began to add some details to her story. Now she was talking about another man who was with them that night. Also, according to Nikki, Chad had gambling problems. Finally, after long hours and many contradictions, a version of what might have happened to Chad began to emerge. Nikki said that on that night, she had left the house and was waiting outside in the car, while Earl remained in the house for a few more minutes. During this time, she heard a gunshot. A few minutes later, Earl came out of the house, got into the car, and reported that Chad was dead. They drove back to the hotel together. Nikki provided a written confession containing these details. But after further reflection, she changed her mind about providing this statement and tried to destroy it. On December 26th, when Nikki had texted her husband that she was at work, she had actually returned to Bismarck but did not go home. Instead, Nikki checked into a hotel with Earl, whom she had met in person. A history of correspondence between them over the past few months revealed a romantic relationship that had grown into messages about buying real estate together. Nikki and Earl had looked at a large and expensive house in Austin, Texas. She had even set up several job interviews in the area in preparation for the move. The day after returning to town, Nikki contacted the insurance company to take out a renter's insurance policy in her name. Under this policy, she could receive up to $26,000 if the contents of the house were damaged or destroyed. She also applied for additional insurance on all the jewelry Chad had bought her over the years. This was a modest amount of coverage compared to the life insurance policy she had taken out for Chad, which amounted to over $500,000. On January 1st, the day after Chad was shot and the day before he was found, Nikki and Earl visited a jewelry store where Chad had made purchases. There they obtained receipts for the sale of earrings, rings, and a wedding set. Then, on January 3rd, the day after her husband was discovered, Nikki filed a claim for home insurance and expanded coverage for her other belongings. A few days later, she contacted Chad's employer to inquire about possible payouts from them, and also filed an insurance claim. Nikki Sue, was arrested on January 7th on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to commit arson, and conspiracy to interfere with evidence. Earl Howard was arrested on the same charges 2 days later in Michigan at the U.S. Canada border as he was trying to return home to Bellwood. Neither Nikki nor Earl was charged with murder, as ballistics experts could not determine who had pulled the trigger. The case was delayed several times. First, Earl Howard sought a trial without Nikki. He claimed she had a criminal past, including acts of financial fraud. He said she had committed what she was charged with on her own, murder for insurance money. He did not want to be associated with her previous bad deeds. But the request for separate trials was denied. The two were to stand trial together. The next delay was caused by coronavirus restrictions. In the fall of 2021, when jury selection was set to begin, there was another setback. News came that Earl Howard had decided to take a plea deal. He was sentenced to 50 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years in exchange for pleading guilty to conspiracy to commit murder, arson, and conspiracy to fabricate evidence. Earl was included on the prosecution's witness list for the upcoming trial of his former lover, Nikki Sue. In early 2022, Nikki's public defender filed a motion to dismiss the case, citing a breakdown in the relationship between him and the defendant. The details of what happened are concealed due to attorney-client confidentiality, but the motion was granted. There were only a few weeks left before the new trial began. It was not until the end of September 2022 that another date was set. Earl's bank statement indicated that the day before the murder, he had purchased a gas torch kit for over $300. Only a few months later did investigators link this purchase to a photograph taken inside the Ensel family garage. The photo showed the top of the torch kit. Investigators returned to the crime scene and confiscated the gas torch kit as evidence. The tanks in the kit, containing flammable and potentially hazardous liquid, were empty. Investigators linked this liquid to the one that ignited the mattress next to Chad Ensel. It was further established that the pack of cigarettes found just a few feet from the source of the basement fire matched the brand of cigarettes in the ashtray of Earl's pickup truck. Nikki continued to point the finger at Earl as the one who pulled the trigger and started the shooting. She also continued to claim that Chad was a violent drunk and that she had suffered in the marriage. In her opening statement, prosecutor Julie Ann presented a detailed chronology of the crime. She showed photos of Nikki and Earl walking around town together. She recounted how the failed attempts to disable the security system were followed by numerous visits to the house by the couple. First to save Nikki's belongings from the planned fire, then to commit the murder, and then to set the house on fire. 2 technicians confirmed that, in fact, the furnace that was found to be smoldering had virtually no malfunctions. The defense had little to work with other than pointing the finger at Earl. Family members and other witnesses who knew Chad well insisted that he was not prone to violent behavior. Chad was not the type of person to escalate arguments. Nikki Sue did not testify. If she had, her criminal past, which had never been presented to the judge, would have come to light. The defense deferred its opening statement and called no witnesses. In his closing argument, defense attorney Tom Dixon made one main assertion. 2 individuals had been charged with conspiring to murder Chad and burn down the house. Earl never appeared in court. It was quite possible that the state found his testimony against his former lover unnecessary. The question of who actually pulled the trigger introduced some ambiguity. The state had developed a reliable and detailed timeline based on his cell phone data, video camera recordings, sensors, and insurance policies. A total of 44 witnesses were heard. It took the jury about 2 hours to reach a verdict on all the charges. Judge Douglas Barr ordered a detailed report to be prepared on all stages of the investigation, outlining all the assumptions that should affect the severity of Nikki's sentence. 1. Nikki Sue was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Thank you for watching. I recommend checking out the other stories as well. Click right now, and don't forget to hit the bell and subscribe to our channel. Timing.